For lesson 1.1, actually 2.1, sorry. 2.1, chapter 2 is going to be on what we call quadratic functions. So we're going to be doing a lot with them. First of all, let's do a definition even before we start. What a quadratic function is, so let's go ahead and write that down, is it looks like this. Something times x squared plus something times x plus something, and it equals what we call y, or it's y equals that. It doesn't matter whether it equals y or y equals it, but it looks maybe like this. And the first thing we're going to do before we start graphing and doing all that good stuff is we're just going to practice evaluating them, putting numbers in for x and seeing what it spits out. We're going to do it two ways, both by hand and by calculator. So our question or our goal is going to be, how do I evaluate quadratic functions? So you're going to be putting numbers into them and see what comes out. And we're going to be doing that, like I said, two ways, both by hand and with a graphing calculator. So right now I'd like you to go grab a graphing calculator from the front of the room. They're in a box. And leave the lid to it in the box. So you're going to go grab a graphing calculator, and you're going to actually leave the lid on my desk. So pause the video and go get a graphing calculator. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to just discuss this quadratic equation. X squared minus 2x plus 5, and we're going to evaluate it when x is equal to a -1. When you're doing it by hand, this is what I'm going to require you to do, or I will be sending you back to fix it. When you do it by hand, everywhere you see an x, you're going to replace it with a set of parentheses. Only where you see an x. So that x is being replaced with an empty slot. And in that empty slot, you're going to dump the number at which you're evaluating. So we're going to put in a -1, and we're going to put in a -1. Then you're going to go in your head, do what it says to do. We're going to keep the numbers nice and low so that you can, I want this completely without a calculator. So you're going to go and just think of -1 times -1. A negative times a negative equals a positive. And then you're going to say -2 times -1. Again, a negative times a negative is a positive. And the 5 is what we call a constant. It doesn't vary because it has no x or no variable with it. We add left to right. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 5 is 8. And it's important that you go left to right in case there's negatives in there because it actually does matter. What I mean by that is, had that been 1 plus 2 minus 5, well, let's just leave it at that. Now what I want to do is have you take out that calculator, and I'm going to show you how we're going to be entering those on the calculator. So I'm going to go back here and grab my calculator and put it at the forefront. So grab your calculator, turn it on down here in the bottom left. If this screen doesn't pop up, you hit second and then you hit quit, and it gives you a clean sheet of paper on which to work. We're going to enter this exactly as we saw it. All right, we are doing x squared minus 2x plus 5 when x is a -1. So let's go do that. We are going to enter it exactly as we see it. We need parentheses. Actually, you have to have them on the calculator. Otherwise, it won't square the entire negative. So we are doing x squared. So your squaring button is now highlighted in red, minus 2 times x. It's going to look exactly like it did when we did it by hand. Plus 5, enter. And up will pop that 8. So we're going to be working both ways, both on our calculator and by hand. When you get the worksheet, the odds are by hand and the evens are by calculator. So we're really just going to do one more of these and then I will let you go to work. So we're going to throw one in that has a whole bunch of negatives to show you how you really need to be careful. We're going to do negative 2x squared minus 2x minus 1 when x is negative 2. So here's how you need to do it when you do it by hand. Everywhere you see an x, you're going to put a set of parentheses. You're going to have a negative 2 set of parentheses squared minus 2 set of parentheses minus 1. In those parentheses, you're going to dump in your value for x, which is negative 2. Now, you have to remember your rules of order because math doesn't get done like English does left to right. Math has a hierarchy of, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And exponents need to be given top priority, second to parentheses. So I need to square this first before I do anything else. So this is really negative 2 times negative 2 squared is a negative 2 times a negative 2, which is a 4. I've got minus a negative 2, minus 2 times negative 2. I've got two negatives there, which gives me a plus 4, and I have a minus 1. Negative 2 times 4 is a negative 8. Plus 4 minus 1. And then I add and subtract left to right. You multiply and divide left to right. So I go negative 8. It's 8 below 0. It goes up 4 degrees. It's now 4 below 0. And it falls 1, and it's now 5 below 0. Think of temperature when you're adding and subtracting with negatives. It's helpful. And I'm at negative 5. Now I want you to go back to the calculator and let's do this exact same one in full on the calculator. So I'm going to go back to my calculator screen so you can see it here. And we're going to do that same one. We've got, I'm going to put it down here, negative 2x squared minus 2x minus 1 when x is a negative 2. So let's go enter it. Again, you can clear off the one above it or just leave it there if you would like. But it was negative 2 parentheses x squared, and x is a negative 2. And then it was minus 2x, x is a negative 2. And then it's minus 1. And again, if you miss what buttons to push, you can always go and pause and rewind. So notice it looks just like my by hand work, and now I'm going to hit enter. Now here's another cool thing, and that's exactly what we got. If you prefer, and if you're kind of good at calculators, what some people will do is go like this. My x value is negative 2. I'm going to take negative 2 and store it in x. Now I can enter it truly as the original problem looked like, and my calculator will go take care of putting it in parentheses and rules of order. So watch. Now I can go negative 2x squared minus 2x minus 1, and my calculator has stored a negative. I've stored that in there, so when I hit enter, I'll get that negative 5 again. So that's another way. You have two options on your calculator. One is to enter parentheses everywhere you see the x in the original. Remember, it was negative 2x squared minus 2x minus 1, and we were doing it when x equals negative 2. Or we can store our value in x. So if the next problem, your x value that you're putting in is, say, -3, you can just go -3, store it in x, and hit enter, and it'll override the previous storage. So you just have to remember when you go to the next problem to store that. So what I'd like you to do is go up and get a worksheet. You're going to be getting worksheet number 1, evaluating, and it is kind of a buff bright gold color. And I'm going to actually just leave you to start those. If you're having an issue on your calculator, you just come see me. All right, have a good one. We're done.